We're going to look at geometric sequences. We've already looked at arithmetic sequences, one like 2, 5, 8, 11, and so on, where there was a common difference of 3. We added something each time to get the next term. Those were arithmetic. Easy for me to write. Arithmetic sequences. So what a geometric sequence is one like you're familiar with of something like 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, and so on, where instead of adding the same thing each time, we're multiplying each term by something to get the next term. And then we multiply by that same thing to get the next term. So in this case, I multiply by 2, and I multiply by 2, and I multiply by 2, and so on and so forth. That thing that we multiply by is what's called a common ratio. And it's signified by the letter R. And so R is equal to 2 in this case, and that's what we multiply each time. To find it, just like in arithmetic, you took a term and subtracted the one before it. In this case, to find what R is, you pick a term and divide by the term before it. So R is going to be 16 divided by 8, which is 2, or 8 divided by 4, which is 2, and so on and so forth. That's called the common ratio. If each time you don't multiply by the same thing, it's not a geometric sequence then. So we could have something that went 3, -9, 27, -81, and kept going like that. And the common ratio then, if I took a term and divided it by the one before it, -9 divided by 3 would be -3. 27 divided by -9 is -3. -81 divided by 27 is -3. And so we know that this is geometric then. And the common ratio is -3. All right. If you were given a sequence then, so let's look at a couple examples here. We look at the first one here to find the common ratio. If I were to look at this one, we just do 5 divided by 1 is 5. 25 divided by 5 is 5. So the common ratio would be 5. This one I could do 16 divided by -4. So common ratio is going to be -4. Tell if it's geometric. -1 divided by 3 is is 1/3. 2 divided by 1 is not 1/3. 6 divided by 2 is not 1/3. So this would not be geometric. 6 divided by 1 is 6. 36 divided by 6 is 6. 216 divided by 36 is 6. So this one is geometric. Okay, that's how you check. To find the first 3 terms in a sequence after the last one given, you have to find what the common ratio is. So we'll start with one like, let's start with one with a fraction. To find what the common ratio is, I'm going to divide this by the term in front of us. 3/2 divided by -3/1. When you divide by a fraction, you invert it and multiply. So times -1/3. The 3's cancel out, and we get -1/2. So my common ratio is -1/2. So the next 3 terms, I'm going to do 3/8 times -1/2 is -3/16. So the next 3 terms are going to be -3/16. -3/16 times -1/2 is going to be a positive 3/32. Each time you're just really multiplying by the denominator by 2 and changing the sign. The next one is going to be -3/64. if I were to do this one, common ratio is 12 divided by 6, which is 2. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 3 divided by 1.5 is 2. So my common ratio is 2. So each time I'm multiplying by 2, so the next term, three terms are going to be 12 times 2 is 24. 24 times 2 is 48. 48 times 2 is 96. If we were to look like this, probably the easiest one would be to deal with these two. I'm going to take r is 2 divided by negative 12, which is negative 1/6. So they're just going to be alternating in sign. So if I were to look at the next three terms, I know that this one's going to be positive, this one negative, and this one positive, because the ratio is negative. Then all I'm going to do is multiply each of these by 1/6. 1/3 times 1/6 is 1/18. 1/18 times 1/6 is 1 over 108. That's 108. It's going to be negative. And then this is a positive 1 over 6 times 108, which is 648. And that's how you find the terms. Okay, so when we go back, if we looked at an arithmetic again, to find any particular term, there was a formula. A sub 1n is a1 plus n minus 1 times the common difference. For geometric, there's a similar formula, and it's really just a matter of, if I went back to this one, the first term, this was a1. If we start out and just think about a2 is going to be a1 times r, whatever the common ratio is. a3 is going to be that one times r again, so it's a1 times r, or a1 times r squared. A to the fourth is going to multiply that by r again, so it's going to be a1 times r cubed. A to the fifth would be a1 times r to the fourth. And you can see that this exponent is one less than the term we're trying to find. And so it turns out the formula is just an is a1 times r to the n minus 1. And so if we want to find a particular term of a sequence, we want to find the 12th term of this one. So we know that n equals 12. My common ratio is negative 9 over negative 3, which is positive 3. So a sub 12 is going to be a1 times my common ratio, which is 3, to the 11th. And then it's a matter of taking the calculator and working that out. We're going to go negative 3 times 3 raised to the 11th power. Negative 531,441. So a sub 12 is negative 531,441. And there's my answer. If we were to do this one, my common ratio, I know that n equals 10, r is 20 over 40, which is 1/2. So a sub 10 is the first term, 160, times 1/2 to the 10 minus 1, or 9th power. So it's just a matter again of putting that in there. 160 times parenthesis 0.5 or 1/2, if you want to put that in there, raised to the 9th power. And we get that a sub 10 is 0.3125. Now if you want to think about that as a fraction, on these calculators, what you can do is you go to math, and you can see that this changes it to a fraction. And so I can just choose number 1 and hit enter, or we know that A10 is 5/16. I'll accept the answer either way. But that's what the lesson for today is. Good luck.